to Two Gals and a Glass Half Full. I think everyone listening has stress in their life. Good stress, bad stress, all different types of it. So this episode, you're going to really want to listen to because we're going to be talking about what does stress do on your body and also how can we cope with it a little bit better? How can we decrease our stress? But before we get started, Dr. Jess, what is in your glass?
So I'm working on my smoothie this morning. It's full of goodness, dark fruits and homemade cashew milk, protein powder, chia seeds, flax seeds, microgreens, all the good stuff in one cup. So that way I get a bunch of foods just in this morning rounds. And then I try and, same thing for lunch and dinner, just get as many compact all at once so I get the diversity of nutrients in my day. So Dr. Bobbie, what's in your glass?
I have some just coffee, cold brew, but in my Chicago Bears cup, and we've been terrible for a really long time. So maybe this year might be a little different, but I'm not a cold weather fan, so I will support them all the way.
Nice. And then with us today, we have a special guest. Her name is Samantha. And before Samantha does her introductions, what's in your glass?
Today I have some coffee. There's kind of a joke amongst mental health therapists. We always got either water or coffee. So I love coffee in moderation, just gives me a boost. So that's what I've got.
Yeah, I love it. And so Samantha, tell us a little bit about you. Like, why would it be so interested to talk to you on our podcast?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, my name's Samantha. Most people call me Sam. I've worked in the mental health field for the last 10 years. And I've worked in residential treatment facility as well as private practice, which I've done in the more recent years. And I've also worked as an adjunct professor of psychology at a local college. So I just have a huge passion for mental health, all things psychology, all of that. It's definitely a huge part of my life.
Nice. So definitely somebody that we could talk to about stress. I'd say you're very qualified for us to ask you those questions.
And I also, I work currently over at Lotus Therapy Group. We are a private practice located in Illinois, in Frankfurt and Naperville. And we are a team of 7 therapists and 3 dietitians. And we work a lot with clients with eating disorders, trauma, addiction, anxiety, depression, some family and couples counseling as well.
I love, Dr. Jess and I love that you said you have nutritionists along with the mental health because Dr. Jess and I always talk about how we are so much stronger when we involve more disciplines in and how much we can help, an individual outside of just physical therapy. There's only so much we can do, but working with a mental health counselor, working with a nutritionist or dietitian, working with those other fields, we can help the patient along so much further. So love hearing that you have all of that in there with you.
Yeah, everything's interconnected, all aspects of our health.
Yeah, absolutely. So that being said, when we think about stress, this is that big topic, stress, isn't stress, horrible and bad and it's terrible. But how do we even know, what are some common signs that we are in a stress state?
It's a great question. It's, it's a little different for everyone, but I would say some of the most common ones are, first of all, heart rate can increase because stress it's an energy. These hormones are being released in your body and they're kind of amping you up. And so there can be an increase in heart rate. There is also a hormone that's released that can increase blood pressure. So again, it's kind of this increase in this energy. Another one that is so common is muscle tension and tightness. People will tend to naturally tense up when they're feeling stressed. All emotions come with kind of different body posturings. Our bodies take on different postures and positions with different emotions. Stress, we tighten, we tense.
I notice, especially the tension part, I work with a lot of neck pain, headaches, things like that. And, a lot of the times I come down, I'm like, what's going on in your life? Just to find out because we're doing everything we should be doing, but you're like, oh, well, it's just so stressful. And so it's it's amazing how that mental, emotional can cause physical impairments.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And it absolutely can. It's so common for the longer someone is staying in that tense state, for exactly what you're saying, for it to result in headaches, sometimes even migraines and neck and shoulder pain, and even their jaws hurting, because they're just holding it in and not fully aware of how it's affecting them.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll have patients that, it's like they're up here all the time. And you're like, what if you just brought those shoulders down a little bit? And they're like, oh,
Mhm.
again, I think you're doing that all day.
You almost can hear him breathe. Like when you
Yeah,
ask them to do it, you can almost hear that sign of relief of like, oh, like the body physically relaxing.
yeah.
Mhm.
And it's just like not holding those shoulders in that high place, or like, like it happens a lot with, you just kind of see that posturing of being closed in, like everything is tight and closed. Like the arms come in, they internally rotate, upper traps elevate, everything seems to like brace. And this is what we see, from the physical side of things. So on the mental health side of things, it's like there's that big connection with posturing and like understanding that stress is something that's probably like a baseline major part of what's going on. So I think that's good to talk about. And then if we go further into that, so we recognize that there's these things that happen and there's these symptoms that happen. So how does that start to impact our physical health outside of pain?
Right. It's a great question, because the longer someone stays in this state of stress, which, kind of taking a step back, it's an emotion that we're all going to feel sometimes. But if someone's living with more in a chronically stressed state, again, the blood pressure, if that's staying high, that could affect their arteries. And as a long term, it could potentially, in serious cases, even lead to heart attack, stroke, be a contributing factor. Stress over time, if it's again chronically there, it can also weaken the immune system. So it can actually increase the risk of getting sick, or if you are sick, it can impede your I guess your chance of getting better, quickly. And maybe even if you're injured, which I'm sure you work with a lot of people who are injured, the stress can actually impact and affect and actually lengthen the amount of time that they're recovering from injuries. It can also increase stomach acid that might lead to heartburn. So when stress is left untreated, it can really just wreak a lot of havoc on the body.
Yeah, I think I've seen that just with, again, like family members, even myself, like in different periods of time where like we had this phase where we were in between houses and we had 7 weeks where we didn't have a plan, and we had two dogs, and like, where can you stay with two dogs? It was like my jaw hurt so bad. I mean, it was insanely painful. I had just these horrible headaches, and it was like, I mean, obviously it was just that stress state, my heart was racing all the time. And so I can only imagine if like we hadn't found a resolution to that situation of like, what are we going to do for these 7 weeks? Um, like if that's just your constant baseline and you do that for decades, it's like talk about chronic pain, heart disease, all of the different things that are not good, and we would like to prevent if possible. So if we know that it's not good to remain in the stress state, so that's clear for chronic stress. So what are ways that we can handle that? Like, what are some, positive ways that we can kind of start that process of like managing the stress in our lives?
Right. I think the first step is a lot of self-awareness. Someone really needs to be aware of the emotion that's happening. Sometimes in our field, we'll say, name it to tame it. You have to be able to name an emotion and recognize it in order to start regulating it or managing it or getting a handle on it. So that's a huge part of kind of the first step of treatment. If someone's coming in, with a lot of stress, is how is it manifesting emotionally, physically, like in your somatically, what's happening in your body, and really just naming it. And that's the first step.
Mhm.
I can say so. My body reacts two very specific ways to stress. One is when I'm aware of stress. I have a lot of like intestinal issues, stomach issues when I feel very stressed. And nothing else hurts. Like I don't feel sick. My stomach just all of a sudden hurts and all that. The other one, but that's when I'm aware of like, I'm like, oh, I know I have a lot of stress, but I also sometimes I'm not aware that I'm stressed. And when I am not aware, I get terrible nightmares. Like I can't sleep. So like when that starts happening, then I have to like kind of go back because that's like a different type of stress for me. It's not like I'm running late, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, or I have a big test or something like that. It's something underlying that I haven't figured out yet and I didn't know was bothering me. And that shows up in like nightmares, which is kind of weird to me because like I could not feel stress at all, but I'm getting terrible nightmares. I'm not sleeping at night. And almost every time when I go back and I kind of pick through, I figure out it's due to something that's stressing me or that I feel overwhelmed with, but it's just not at the forefront of my brain. But sometimes it's hard, like to be aware of like what, you know, I know my body pretty well. And when that happens, I know it's not, I'm not sure what's going on at that point.
Yes, I think you make some really good points there because you're absolutely right. Like the GI system, that's another, I guess, really big thing that's affected with stress part of the body. Like, when you enter like a stressed state, your body's entering kind of this like fight or flight survival state. And so your GI system, stomach gets affected. It can cause people to have trouble sleeping and you're right. It's sometimes those stressors are on the surface and we're able to identify them. Sometimes they're deeper and for some people coming in, some of my clients, it's linked to sometimes like deeply rooted trauma that is going to take some time to get through. But it's interesting how just different things that could be very deep are impacting them and coming out in these stressful ways.
Mm-hmm. So like, what are techniques that you can help people with, like just identifying if they don't realize they're stressed? I mean, like acute stress is kind of easy to find, right? Like I'm running late, my heart rate's elevated, I have to like rush to get somewhere. Like that one's pretty easy to identify. However, when it's like that chronic stress, it's just harder to identify that. So name it to tame it. I love that phrase. So what are strategies to even name it? I mean, because that can be the hardest part.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. That's a great question because a lot of people who come in and they have been dealing with chronic stress, that's their norm. That's their baseline. They're used to it and it almost becomes a comfort zone for them. It's familiar for them. And so for them to name it, sometimes exactly, that's difficult to do. One thing I like to maybe start with if someone's having trouble naming it is to look at the physical symptoms. Like it can be easier to identify a headache versus something, more of an abstract term like stress or anxiety.
Right.
Oh, I have this headache every night at 6 o'clock and maybe they've been, scrunching their face all day because they've been so stressed. So sometimes just identifying like physically what's happening and then what emotion could that be linked to and is it stress. And something else I think that's helpful is kind of taking like an approach with yourself like an explorer or a learner or a student, like you're trying to learn about yourself. So taking a curious approach with yourself, not being hard on yourself for struggling with stress, not not getting too wrapped up in it, but kind of taking a step back and almost looking at it from this observer standpoint of what is happening for me in a chaotic moment. And that's how someone can, taking that step back can get some more of that insight of, oh, that does happen for me when, I'm stressed.
Yeah, I think that for me, when I can tell when stuff is like off, right? Because I'll just notice that my heart rate is just feels like it's just kind of elevated, right? You're just kind of like, that's not my norm, right? So sometimes what I'll do, like if I can, I mean, in the middle of the day I can't, but like I'll go for a run and just work on, breath work while running and just kind of, it almost turns meditative at that point, because like your thoughts just can start coming, after, it's not like right away, like you have to kind of get into a rhythm, and then it's like I'll start realizing like what that undercurrent might be. But sometimes it's like, for me, it's like doing some kind of an activity where I'm not engaging with anybody else. It's just me. Because like, sitting down to meditate is like really hard. Like I'm just gonna like looking for the flame. But like that repetitive activity, or like if I go out in the garden and I'm just like, moving the vines around, because that's like everything's starting to grow now in Florida. So like I kind of move my stuff around and keep everything moving happy, and this goes go this way and this goes this way. And it's like all of a sudden it starts coming to me of like, this is part of it, this isn't where it needs to be. This isn't sustainable with whatever it is that I'm doing, or maybe it's something I'm worried about, or who knows, right? So those are just like strategies that have helped me tremendously, just with the identification process, because like that's honestly one of the hardest parts. Like once you can name it, like you can do something about it. But it's like it's like trying to do differential diagnosis of an unknown, illness. Like you don't know what to do yet until you can diagnose it. And I think that's what makes stress so hard.
Mhm.
For me, in order sometimes to name it, I have to find a way to calm myself down. Because if I'm so worked up, it doesn't matter, if how long I sit and try to think about it. And I think that's where you get like with running or, repetitive garden, it like takes your mind off of it and allows your body to release endorphins to like help you breathe, to help you calm down. So for me, sometimes it's finding something like that, whether it's playing with my dogs or going for a walk. When I was younger, I used to just go for a drive. I just get in my car. Gas is too expensive these days. But I would just get in my car and just drive and explore new places. And for me, the other big one is playing music, and playing music that kind of matches my feelings. So it allows me a way to release those emotions, whether I'm happy, sad, whatever it is. It allows me a way to connect where I'm not having to, in that moment, I'm not having to admit what I'm feeling. I'm just connecting to this song that's allowing those emotions to leave for me.
Mhm. Right. Yeah. I think that makes so much sense too, because if you're in this stressed, dysregulated fight or flight state, what happens in the brain is your logic center of the brain kind of starts to go offline. And so it's hard to think rationally. So exactly, sometimes just stepping away, doing a couple simple things, help bring that logic back online is going to be so helpful.
Mhm. Yeah, I think it's key that it's really different for everybody. So
Yeah.
like it's like if you're not a runner, going for a run isn't going to be your answer, right? If you don't have a garden in your backyard, gardening is probably not your answer. And like I just remember in graduate school, like Bobbie always connected more with music than I did. I mean, that was just like I mean, it was just like a clear, distinct difference. Like I like music, but I don't connect with it like she does. And so when we were handling stress of graduate school, which was like, I mean, Lord, you were just getting, I mean, it's a lot, that constant performance and having to like, balance it all, and, always being tested, always being essentially like, held up to the standard of like, are you good enough or not? Right? Like, are you gonna pass or not? That was rough. And so I think that's where the two of us really realized we're very different when it comes to stress management, and that's okay. Like her techniques didn't work for me and mine vice versa. So that's anytime I'm working with a patient, it's like, hey, like it's okay to like explore options, like that's totally fine. Just because this didn't work doesn't mean something won't work. Are there other like just other strategies that you've had patients say like, or clients say like, this really helped me a lot, and it was like something that you were kind of surprised by? You're like, oh wow, that was interesting. um
Yeah, absolutely. It's, I mean, going back to what you said, like everyone's so different.
yeah.
So someone might come in and maybe like, yeah, loud music helps them. And it's like, go for it. I'm a big fan of the term workability, do what works. So I might be sitting with a client and we might be talking about all these different coping skills as kind of their next step in handling their stress. And I always let them know it's okay if like this one doesn't work or that one doesn't work. You need to find what's best for you. And I do think something, I guess something that might be surprising that works the best are the simple ones. A lot of times with clients, I'll make jokes that, okay, I know I'm talking about breathing again, and every therapist talks about just take a deep breath, but that's the one thing that you always have with you. Like if all else fails, you can't do other coping, you don't have your essential oils, you don't have your music, you can breathe. And when you breathe, you want to make sure that as you're, taking a deep breath, it's very deep, it's coming from within, and your exhale is longer than your inhale. So when it all needs to be slow to calm you down if you're in a stressed state, but make sure that the exhale is longer than the inhale, very slow. And that is going to help calm down the nervous system and bring you down at least a couple notches so you can start settling, thinking more clearly. So that, I mean, that's just a simple one. Another simple one goes back to that awareness. A lot of times I'll work with clients and I'm encouraging them to be aware of when they're starting to tense because of their stress and to catch it. And then bring down the shoulders. If your tongue's at the roof of your mouth, bring that down, relax your jaw, to kind of keep doing that throughout the day. And that's going to help them to reset a little bit throughout the day. I think something else that I see to be really helpful is to take a step back. As humans, we can all recognize intense emotions. When we're really angry, when we're really stressed, we know it. Like it's there, we know it. I like to think about it's a lot more beneficial to, yes, we want to recognize the intense stuff. However, let's start to recognize like the lower and mid-level emotions, because if somebody is, feeling stressed at a 1, 2, 3 out of 10, they can recognize that and maybe then start to be proactive in dealing with it versus just letting it climb, climb, and climb.
You read my mind because I was just about to ask you, like, we're so big into preventative. So it's really important to, when you are at this elevated state, it's really important to bring you back down. And that's really important to recognize and kind of be able to have coping strategies to do that. But I think what also is important and we need to move to is like, how do we recognize it before it happens? Or how do we take the time in our day to spend a few minutes on ourselves, whether it's during the day, whether it's once a week, once a month, whatever, like do that self-love, that self-care to kind of keep that at a lower, regular, more sustainable level, because we're always going to have stress. I mean, that's just the part of life. So what are some techniques or coping or activities that like you would recommend to clients to do more on a proactive level and more as like a preventative?
Yes, I think one of the first things to recognize is that when people, you're right, like we're always going to have stress, our culture is very busy, all of that. And I think what happens is it's easy for people to slip into not doing the things that they enjoy or the things that are self-care, to start putting that off. Oh, I don't have time to exercise today. I don't have time to, I can't go to bed early. I need to get this work done. And they keep driving ahead, and that stress rises, and then we have a problem. But to take a step back, one thing that I recommend is to do one enjoyable thing every day. And it doesn't have to be a big thing. I think sometimes clients look at me with wide eyes. Well, I can't fit that into my day. Yes, you can. It can be something as simple as a cup of coffee. It can be a walk with your dog. It can be listening to some music. It's just thinking about for them what is enjoyable and building at least one thing of that into their day to help maintain their mental health, help keep their stress levels low. I think it's also about like listening to their bodies. And, it's as basic as sleep, nutrition, hydration. It's so simple to talk about that, but you'd be surprised someone who comes in, which maybe you wouldn't be surprised, but people come in and, I want to start at kind of the building blocks. How much sleep are you getting? If they're getting 5 hours a night, we're starting there. We need to start at the foundational things. And because if you're not getting enough sleep, if you're not eating enough, you're not drinking water, it's going to make you feel poorly physically, and it's going to make you more susceptible to being stressed as the events of life show up. So it's those foundational things. It's doing at least one thing a day that you enjoy. I also think it's helpful to here and there every day have some kind of gratitude practice. And that doesn't have to be elaborate. I know, right? Everyone's busy, but to take a moment and just think about, either your kids or your home, your job, the weather, like whatever it is, just being grateful, thankful for something. And that starts to teach your mind to be oriented and to look for the good rather than just kind of being in this kind of negative, stressed, everything's too hard type of state.
Yeah, no, I definitely I 100% resonate with that, because that's, I think, one of the things with, I mean, like anybody in life, right? Like when I've got 2 kids and then I've got a business and, all of this other stuff, it's so easy to just think about what has to be done versus living today, and just the gratitude of, I get today. I don't know if I'm going to have tomorrow. It's not guaranteed, but I do have today. And so, how do I want to start that day? Just starting there, how, I woke up, this is great. And okay, someone peed the bed. Worst case scenario, we wash the sheets. That's okay, right? So it's how you're looking at each of those activities. If you just start that day with I get to be here today, which is awesome. We started with this, in the car on the way to school with my oldest, who's 6.5 now. We play fun music and we just jam out, and I sing all the words wrong and it's fantastic. But it's just such a fun way to I mean, everybody well, not everybody, a lot of people have to commute, and there's different ways of commuting. But that's a way more fun way to commute, is singing out loud with a 6-year-old. I mean, come on, right? So it's these are the little things that have just helped me tremendously, so much, with just how I enter my space. I mean, it's nothing major. It's nothing that costs money. It doesn't cost more time. I'm already having to drive. So it's, for me, it's made a big impact on keeping that balance between life and home and me versus others and all of that other stuff, I don't know, Bobbie, if you I know your days are different than my days. There's no major commute like that, but I know your transition to work and mom is it's tough. It's really tough. You just get spread even more thin when you add more things on.
I think for me, the big thing right now, and it's just a tough, I mean, I think every season of raising a child is probably has its own challenges. Mine just right now really affects my sleep and my ability to do things. So, sometimes it's just kind of looking at her, and she's today 11 months, is looking at her and reminding myself that these times are short, and she's only going to be this little for not so long, and just kind of breathing in and seeing her when she smiles at you. It's just okay, and again, it's taking that deep breath. It's allowing myself to calm down and enjoy and be thankful that I do get to wake up and she's next to me, and things like that.
Yeah, I love that. And I have 3 little ones too. They're 1, 3, and 5. And so,
You're in it.
it's definitely right, that can be stressful, and there's so much gratitude. And I love what you said, where recognizing that it's temporary. It's so easy when we have maybe a difficult emotion like stress to feel sucked in, and it can kind of feel like it's always going to be like this. And it's so helpful to take a step back and realize, like, yes, this emotion's hard now. It can't last forever though. And that's just the science of it. An emotion is energy in motion. It has a shelf life, it's temporary, it cannot go on forever. So giving that reminder when we are in the middle of a stressful moment can sometimes give us a little bit of hope.
It will get better eventually, right?
And what isn't there a quote or a saying like it can't rain forever? You know, like the sun has to come back out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I think that's awesome. I think I mean, stress is just one of those things that it's everybody, no matter what, is going to be impacted by stress. It just is what it is. And it's something that very well can be managed. It's just like everything else. Like we manage weight, we manage health, we manage our money, we manage, maintaining our home. Like everything it's just management. That's all it is. It doesn't have to be this thing that's super like it's only affecting me and this is like this big bear that's on my back. There's ways of just kind of looking at it and saying like, well, yeah, this is my bear, but someone else has a different bear. Right? And what if we learn how to tame that bear? I think just different. Yeah. That's I think one of the things I hear just with like when people come in, especially in chronic pain. I think there's just ways of looking at the situation that can make the situation very hard to manage, or there's ways where you can look at that same exact situation and find solutions. And I think it's just if you're looking to find the solutions and you work with a qualified professional who can bring you through all of the steps of identifying, working through things, because especially when there's some of the deep rooted stuff, that's where I think, from my like understanding, I think, really you should probably work with a professional to make sure that you don't get stuck in any stages. I'm Samantha, I think you can probably speak more to that than I can, but that's typically what I recommend to my patients.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. And I think you're right. Like, stress it's all about managing it, and it will come up. It's an emotion that's going to happen. And so it's not a question of that. It's how are we responding to it? That's where we have a choice as humans. And sometimes in the therapy space, as I'm working with a client, we're, asking and talking about like, where are they adding on to their own stress unnecessarily? Of course, some of it is the psychological pain that's going to be there. However, people can sometimes maybe say something's urgent when it's not, or put too much on their to-do list. And so it does take a lot of honesty and self-awareness and self-reflection to say, okay, yeah, here's where I'm unnecessarily piling it on, and that can reduce their amount of suffering with it as well. It's still there, it still might not feel great, but we've just maybe brought down their level of distress by looking at where are they, maybe making up deadlines, or overwhelming their own selves.
Right. Absolutely. So if anybody is, or Samantha, do you do telehealth? Is that like a thing? Yeah,
Absolutely.
perfect. Yeah.
We offer in-person visits and telehealth in our office. Yeah.
Yeah. I was pretty sure you did, but I didn't want to say it until I confirmed it. So if anybody listening is interested in working with Sam's office and one of the professionals that they have in there, all of the information for the office is going to be listed in the episode description. So don't hesitate to reach out and make an appointment. And also, if you know anybody that you're like, I really think this person might benefit from hearing this episode, like definitely share it. And like, don't keep it for yourself, share it. And, you never know what kind of difference you can change and make in someone's life. It's just having that thoughtfulness of like, hey, this resonated with me and I found, X, Y, or Z part of it to be helpful. Maybe you would as well. And not in a non-judgmental way of like, hey, you look frazzled, you should listen to this. I mean, there's ways of saying things in a nice way that are genuine. So, share this knowledge. The whole point of our podcast is to just keep putting the information out there in an accessible way of small changes that people can make one step at a time, that are not expensive, cost a lot of time or anything like that. They really improve your overall, well-being and wellness in your life. So subscribe and like and all of that fun stuff to like get more stuff in front of you that we do. That'd be great. And we will see y'all next week.